Hello, everyone, and before we start the podcast, I'd like to make a quick mention of pro political gear. Election season is only just beginning, and you might be wondering about getting some political apparel to show off your views to everyone you know. Need political apparel for friends and family, or even yourself? No problem. Shop Pro Political Gear for all your political apparel needs. Pro Political Gear has collections spanning from Biden, Trump, left wing, 4th of July, Pride, and so much more. Get your pro political gear today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Political Pod. I am your host, Chris Caputo, and alongside me, my co host, Andrew Kornick. And we hope you had a very happy 4th of July, as we did. We didn't see each other for 4th of July, unfortunately, but I had a good time. I had a barbecue out in the back. Andrew had his own, time with his family and all that. So we all enjoyed ourselves, and we hope you guys were stayed safe. And because the driving, you don't want you driving, especially at night with a lot of drinkers. A lot of fireworks around my neighborhood. Hopefully around your guys too. Unfortunately, my dog, she gets really upset with the fireworks. But yeah. I mean, all in all, besides giving my dog Benadryl, so that a little bit, so that she could calm down, my 4th of July was good, and yeah. So welcome to the episode. We got news, and also before we get to the intro, okay, uh. I will mention that we will be doing 2 episodes this week. I'm sorry. Last week we're just busy. We're just me and Andrew are very busy guys at times, and they're just one of those instances where we didn't get a chance to record twice in one week. So life things. But I'm telling you, we're gonna get 2 episodes this week. I'm gonna push myself. Andrew's gonna push himself too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode.
Yeah.
Right, so starting off, we have Andrew giving us the first piece of news of the day.
Yeah. So before we get into some of the bigger pieces that we missed from the past week, I thought I'd start with some interesting developments going on in Wisconsin. They're talking about their state budget basically, and the state house is it's like a 3 seat lead for the Democrats. It's pretty close. Wisconsin isn't a fully blue state as a lot of Midwestern states kind of are, and but they have a Democratic governor, and he actually made some interesting kind of political plays when it comes to the budget. Because obviously, there's going to be a lot of negotiations that get done, and there's some concessions that Republicans typically want. They typically won't spend as much money, whereas Democrats obviously do. And in my opinion, I think spending on your people leads to better outcomes usually. And a lot of the talk about deficit hawkery and you know taxation and all this stuff is kind of overblown. Just to give my perspective on it, but basically, what this guy did, um, one of the provisions was including the school budget, which, one of the negotiations they made basically was that they would increase the pay per student that the state would provide, increase to $325. That increase in the original writing was only to go through from this year to next year, basically, and then it would have to be written up again, and they have to go through the whole negotiation of it, which is usually like it's a pretty classic trick. Even in on a national scale, this will happen a lot where, look at the child tax credit, for example, where they negotiated it and they were able to get a concession because of the context of COVID. But there's obviously lawmakers who want to make that, forever, because why have child poverty? It's literally a policy choice. But obviously Republicans are against that for whatever reason. So it sunsetted and we don't have a child tax credit now. So similar things going on with the school funding in Wisconsin. So what the governor did was he crossed out, because in the writing of it, it basically said from 2020, yeah, from 2023 to 2024. He crossed out like a line from like the first 20 and ended it at 24. So the actual runtime is basically from 2023 to 2400 and like 35. It was something like really funny. So it basically on in paper, it's a 400-year span of this increase, so effectively forever, obviously, because no one's gonna live 400 years from now. And yeah, so it's that was the one that made the headlines and kind of got all the attention. But there's a lot of other vetoes that the governor made in order to kind of circumvent some of the short stops that they've made. So these vetoes include things like obviously Republicans, they want to like kind of protect rich people and not cut their and like prevent tax increases and try to cut their taxes. That was a veto that he did. They obviously, you talk about affirmative action. This is like an ongoing thing in the Supreme Court. On the state level, they wanted to basically fire 188 people from Wisconsin State University or University of Wisconsin in their equity forms. He vetoed that, and the Republicans wanted $10 million in funding in the specific area that the RNC is going to be held next year. That was also vetoed, which again kind of goes to show it's like, I mean, they're against funding for like schools and diversity hires and stuff like that, but then for their own convention they want to conveniently have that money allocated. It's I think when it comes to the policy end of it, like with most issues, pretty much all of them, I do side with Democrats more, even if they don't go far enough often. But what I will say, and I think I've said this before on the show, is that in the Midwest, even though like the Democrats in the Midwest are much better at playing politics than Democrats like in these coastal cities or in like California and New York, for example, where they think, oh well, we have these majorities, we can just kind of do whatever we want. But in the Midwest and in some swing states like Pennsylvania, like they have to actually win their elections. So when they get in there, they actually have to deliver on more promises and actually govern in a more effective way. So another good sign in that. And I thought it was a nice, decent thing to open the show up before we get into the more depressing things that are definitely going to come up later on. And yeah, I'll get Chris on and see if he has anything to add to this.
So, what I do have to add is, well, it's 400 years. I thought that was hilarious when I read that. That's definitely an interesting piece to to this because obviously you said that no one's gonna live for 400 years, but this is supposed to help um, for the next 400 years to the next coming generation for the next like I don't even know how many generations that is,
Yeah.
right? There's like so many
That's
generations that
effectively
you're
just
helping.
saying it's forever.
Yeah, that's basically what it's saying. Um, which I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that it's funny, and that you mentioned is that that the Republicans wanted uh, the state to help fund them for the national committee that's going to happen next year for the convention, which hopefully I get to go to. That's my plan. My plan is to go to both the Republican and Democrat committees, but the Republican one is in Wisconsin. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think Wisconsin is the place where the first Republican debate will be held this August.
I'm not
I
too
think.
sure. Yeah.
Well, I think so. So hopefully I'm right.
hmm
Yeah, I'm not looking
I
it
think
up.
in the last, like the Republicans, like on a national scale in the last election, thought, oh, maybe this is a state we could flip that went for Hillary. Maybe we could switch. Obviously, it didn't happen. They thought they could switch it to Trump, but obviously he vastly underperformed in 2020. But so I guess they're trying to like kind of play that. But I think the story kind of blows some smoke in there because even if people aren't going to understand the intricacies or maybe not agree with everything that the governor does, there is kind of like people are kind of drawn to like winners, and when people kind of outmaneuver you in a way that they will say is to help the people, which in this case it actually is to help the people because it's supporting
Mhm.
their communities in the various ways. So it kind of undercuts that plan, but hopefully or not hopefully, but hopefully for them, they still have their convention. They can try to run some momentum going into
I wish them well. I wish a lot of people
that.
well. That's the same vibes I got from that from you.
Yeah.
um, but definitely get vetoing, including tax cuts for the rich. I mean, that's always a good thing. And it's funny because some people, it not people here. I feel like, well, maybe some people, and maybe in the um, when I write on Twitter or whatever it is, some people think I'm like a leftist or whatever, and I think it's like the oddest thing. I think it's quite hilarious, but maybe some of the things that I agree with, because I think it just makes sense. I mean, it's like
Well, it's like,
something
yeah.
like taxing the rich. I think is just one of those things where it's like, well, where are we gonna get the money from? It's like, well, you complain that these corporations are woke, and then you don't want to tax them, and then you just want to like what do you want to do, you know what I mean? It's like you get mad when a company does something you don't like, and you have nothing but it's like, oh, just take them down. It's like, just take them down. Like how?
Yeah.
Like, you
It,
know what I mean? Like, okay, you could boycott. All right, I understand that. I got it. But when it comes to taxing the rich, like imagine like you pay the same percentage as like Elon Musk or someone in taxes. Like, wouldn't you think that like there's a problem there? Where it's like, okay, well, that doesn't help society. Okay, he created. Well, he didn't really create anything. He just kind of like bought companies. But look at him on Twitter. He's got Twitter, and we're gonna get into Twitter later. We're gonna talk about the rival company, but it's just he owns so much, and it's like if he would have paid the same taxes as you, it just wouldn't make sense. That's just for me. That's not because I looked at some left wing nut job you'd call them or whatever, like Andrew. But like it's like I just don't understand why people can't get this concept that the more money you earn, the more money you pay in taxes, because we've seen that this doesn't create jobs. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think that this is something to really be looked at. You look at a lot of the you walk into a store, and I mentioned this, and even Andrew knows I mentioned this on the show before. You go into like a CVS, you go into a Walgreens. Andrew would know pretty much all this stuff, but you walk in there and you see they're understaffed. You see one person at the counter and there's 10 people online. Now, I don't know if you know of CVS or Walgreens, but if you're clicking on this very niche podcast, most likely you know what a CVS or a Walgreens is, and you know how rich the company is. Even if you don't, if you know the name, you should know that they have a lot of money.
hmm
Okay, a lot more money than your mom and pop shop. Now tell me, if we cut their taxes, do you really think that they're going to employ more people, or are they going to just have more self-checkouts? I'll tell you what. The answer is because when you're in business is to save money. That's the goal. That's the way you're supposed to do things, is save money. There is no problem with saving money. The only problem is that when you don't hire anybody and you have customers that are pissed, you have a worker outworking himself or herself or whatever, okay, because they have to take this guy who wants to buy Reese's, the guy in the back who wants to go to the pharmacy, and all this stuff, and they're all upset that they can't get their item or whatever it is in time. Everyone's got a place to be. I mean, I'm in New York, so really everyone feels like they have, to be somewhere at a certain time. Okay, they're not helping them. They're not helping you. We have done tax cuts all the time, and they don't help. They don't. They just give them more money in their pockets. They don't have more employees. They don't give them more hours or whatever the situation is. And I hear this all the time. So when people say people don't want to work, if you look at the numbers, there's more people working now than ever. Is that a good thing? It can be. Have had this conversation with Andrew, and I was saying, oh, look, under Trump, more people working more than ever. And I realize now, more than ever, under Biden, that that's not always a good thing. And it sounds stupid. You'd be like, oh, that's a stupid thing to say. It's like, well, yeah, of course you want more people working, but it's like, what is the reason why people are working 2 to 3 jobs, right? Like, that's really the issue here, is why people are working more than one job to pay their bills. Now, I guess some people have to do that, but 3 jobs is excessive. Okay? I mean, 2 jobs is excessive. And I'm not saying that if you make 15, if you work at a CVS pharmacy or whatever it is, or counter person, you don't need to live in a mansion. I'm not saying you need that. Like, that's just stupid. And I think anyone that would agree with that is stupid. But what I'm saying here is if you're going to understaff your employees, at least pay them. And how does this come to tax cuts? That's very simple, because they don't do any of these things. They do everything to keep the money in their pockets. So, look, I think that this is a very good legislature from was it Governor Tony Evers? His name
Yep.
is, right? I think that's definitely
Yeah.
good piece of law put in place.
Good
And
politics,
so
good
my
policy.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, I'm done on my tangent, but
Weirdly enough, though, I mean, the tangent kind of plays into our next topic, which
does
is
it really?
does
Oh, I'm
in
looking at it right now.
West
Yeah, you're right.
Hollywood in California, um, among other places, they've all raised their minimum wage. I'll start with the other places. So, yeah, Los Angeles, or hold on. Okay, sorry about that. San Francisco raised their minimum wage to 18.07 an hour. Los Angeles raised their minimum wage to 16.68 an hour. And Washington D.C. as well raised theirs to 17 an hour. I guess these are just like yearly increases that they passed in their own like basically like bills or whatever the case is. But West Hollywood, the reason why I bring them up specifically is their minimum wage is $19.08 an hour, which if you don't know, that's the highest minimum wage in anywhere in the entire country. Which you might think, oh well, that's like way too much money. Like some people say 15 is too much and it causes unemployment and this and that and the third. But I mean, really, we've had $15 minimum wage for close to 10 years now in a lot of these places like New York and California, or at least when we started kind of transitioning to that period. And there really hasn't been this mass exodus and increase of unemployment related to the minimum wage at all. Even when you look at data that tracks like small businesses, they're not really super negatively affected that in the way that people thought would have happened before they started to become implemented into law. And the reason why this is important is like, okay, if it's not really a negative impact on the economy, then why not do it? And like Chris was saying before, when it comes to taxes and stuff like that, the bottom line is always just to save money and to maximize profits. So, you know, if you're cutting their taxes, it's not like they're going to raise wages naturally. And unfortunately, we live in a country where there isn't really strong union membership. There's other countries where they don't need a minimum wage because union membership is so strong that they can just bargain a wage and get probably more than most workers, starting out in America can get. So minimum wage, I think, as of now, is required, and it being $19.08, I think specifically in this town makes sense. The medium you would so to live comfortably in West Hollywood, you would need $76,000 after taxes just to live like a comfortable life there. So yeah, I mean, almost $20 minimum wage definitely makes sense in a place like that. And you can go in the weeds in like different states that maybe the cost of living isn't as high and stuff like that. But I think at this point, most people can agree, especially after recent inflation hikes and whatnot, that 725 just isn't going to cut it as a national minimum wage, and it needs to be at the very least higher than that. And just some fun food for thought. According to a study back in 2020 by the Center for Economic and Policy Research, the minimum wage basically stopped tracking with productivity in the late 60s. So originally, when we had a minimum wage, it not only went up with inflation, it also went up with productivity. So, the more productive people were, then the more, the wage would increase along with, the more inflation devalued the dollar, the more people have to be paid money. Um, Obviously, it stopped tracking with inflation, and it also stopped tracking with productivity because we know we live in this time now where people are working multiple jobs, and it's a pretty normal thing. It's not like you're working your day job and you have like your dream career. It's no, you're working at like 2 to 3 like massive corporations because you need more money. So productivity is at all time high, and if you wanted to account for that, what the minimum wage should be is $21.50, which again is even higher than what it is now. And this was back in 2020. So imagine like it'd probably be maybe like 22, 23 or more in 2023. So there's just a lot that needs to be really emphasized when it comes to the minimum wage stuff because 15 isn't starting to not cut it in a lot of these places as like a starting base pay. There's still a lot of people working multiple jobs and even like states that have it. And imagine what it's like in the places where it's still stuck at 725 and there really is no shot at it going up.
Yeah. So, I guess my whole rant really
It played
fell
into it.
into,
Yeah, it
yeah,
really
it
did.
really did. All right. Well, I guess there was a reason
You
for my
took a
rant
you
this
took a
time.
little nugget from what was going on and said, hey, like like tax cuts don't really help anyone besides rich people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, wages are gonna stay stagnant. And that's why we need
Look,
laws that increase the wages to make sure that there's like an actual minimum that makes sense. And by the way,
But
if you're already making $19, because some people, I remember like when at first I was like, oh, I already make like $15. Why are you gonna pay the guy who's already making like $9 and put them at my level? It's like, okay, well then that gives you something tangible, to be like, oh, well, I've been here, so why I should get a raise too. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So
of course. What I was gonna say is that if you live in like Nebraska, Wyoming, I love bringing up these states that no one cares about. So, um, if you live there, okay, and I don't know how the minimum wage works there. I assume it's very low, and I'm not talking about those states. I just want that to be known. But for cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, DC, you look at the homelessness that goes on in California as a whole, and you wonder, like, what can we do, right? Um, well, first off, you pay your workers. That would be a great start. So if you pay workers, they'll be more inclined to keep the job and do be better at their job. So that's number one. Uh, so that that's there. Number two, if you were to not raise the minimum wage and you expect someone to work at your place and be overworked and underpaid, how long do you think you're gonna have that person
not
working
long.
there?
Some corporations benefit from that. That's a big thing with Amazon.
And it's definitely unfortunate. So how would you say that they benefit? Like they just pick up someone else for a cheaper
Yeah, because they don't
price?
have to.
Yeah.
Because if you work for like a year or two, you don't have to increase. You don't have to keep their pay going up. It's like, okay, just next, next. And also for a high labor job like Amazon, where you're working in a factory and it's like physically demanding. If you keep someone for like 10, 20 years, and after a while they're gonna want like more compensation, or if they get hurt on the job, they have to pay all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
too. So yeah, it's much easier for them to just keep cycling through like 17 to 23-year-olds who are willing to do that much work for the quick, like, oh, I get like however much.
Oh yeah, of course. This is why, and this is why I stress, as me and Andrew are going through it. But always try to, if you can, try to get a degree or try to have a path on what you're gonna do in life because you don't want to be working at McDonald's for the rest of your life. You don't want to be working at you don't want to be working at like a Walgreens or a Dwayne Reed doing counter work for the rest of your life. You don't want to work at any of these jobs, even a mom and pop shop you don't want to work at. You don't want to work at any of these places for a long period of time because you know that where you are now is probably the most you're going to make. And if you expect too much out of these companies, because there is a limit. Like I understand, like obviously, like I said before, you don't have to live in a mansion. If you work a counter job or whatever, right? Like I understand, it's hard. You're overworked and you're underpaid, and that's why I always say, like, okay, you should be paid X amount, and you should have obviously more workers with you, accordingly to the store. But you always have to have a path, and like I said, like hopefully, like this is the path for at least me. Pro political network, it soars, and me and Andrew just become big political content creators, which would be great, right? But we don't know how far that could go, so we obviously have other things that we do. Um, so that's a really important part that I had to mention, because if you sit there and you wait for minimum wage to go up, you're not doing anything with your life,
Yeah.
and
But it's
it's
not even
sad to see a
about
wage.
waiting, because
Hmm.
I think most people who advocate for it are like people like who have some kind of goal. I want to
No,
say,
I'm
or
not saying that they
but
don't
you
have a
should
goal
have
at
a
all,
goal if
but
you don't. I mean, yeah, it's
yeah,
true, but
you know what I mean. But it's
I,
like
I think it kind of defeats the point, because I mean, I think you should still advocate for it and still be
no, no,
strongly
no,
for
no,
it.
no, no. I absolutely believe you should advocate for it because there's always people taking these jobs. What I'm saying is that if you're like, 40, 50 years old and you never had like a career and you only been like a counter person or whatever, like obviously there's like, all right, bud, like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Like, I don't mean that to an attack someone, but it means it's just like one of those things in your
Well, I
head.
think
It's
they should
like,
still be paid a
where,
minimum, though. That
of
that
course they
ensures
should, but
they have a
that's what,
quality life.
of course, I'm not saying they shouldn't. But what I'm saying is for younger people, like let's say like late, like teenager, like 17, 18, or around that range, to like maybe 25 or so. Like, like that's really the age range that you really should be having these jobs. Like, I don't think, you know, someone should be working like three jobs, has to be a waitress, has to work in Walmart, has to work in, because you see these stories all the
And that's
time.
the problem
These
too
stories
with
happen.
that's the problem too when you say, oh, just go to school, because it's like, okay, well, what if you have to work three jobs to get by and then you don't have time to go to school or time to work towards a career? Some people, sure, I
Yeah.
mean, there's maybe a couple people that can make that work, but realistically, that's why it's good to advocate for, well, they should be paid more just straight up, and they should just have more opportunities and access and things covered for them. Like if they want to, work and be more productive members of society.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. But I don't know, like for me, like I agree with that, but I don't think you should be like, if you're a certain age, it kind of has to click in your mind, like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean?
I'm
And
sure. I
I
mean,
mean
I'm sure
that,
it does for a lot of these people.
and it's like I don't really, this conversation is not for older folks. This conversation is for people out probably our age that, if they go on to do something else, to do anything like this, like be a, work counter, or work these jobs that mostly young people do to get by in either high school or college, to really try and set that goal so they don't end up in these situations. Because when you're in these situations, it's not fun. It's not fun. So, and that's what I'm really talking about. I'm not talking about people who are already there. People who are there already either screwed up or had a bad deck of cards. Like, like I really don't know someone else's, personal life. I'm not gonna judge everyone else's, but it's either one of those two things, right? I think you could agree on that. Uh, but yeah, that's really what I'm saying here. Because if you look at minimum wage, I mean, obviously it didn't go up since, I mean, look at the 80s. It did not go up once, like, at all. Like Reagan years, like, like it did not go up one bit. So, I mean, and it really shows how in the long run it kind of um, screwed a lot of people, really. I think a lot of our viewers like Reagan, and that's fine. You could like him. I mean, we don't have to be such fans of him, but you know, like they're like, look, he was good in the short term, right? He made a lot majority of the people in the United States happy in the 80s, and that's great. But we're living in 2023, and we're living the repercussions of
A lot of these
Reaganomics.
policies,
And
yeah,
oh, wait, hold on, Bidenomics. I don't think we ever talked about that,
we
but
didn't.
Bidenomics.
That's the thing too. That's like, it's kind of funny actually, because he tries to position it in like juxtaposition to Reaganomics. It's like the opposite kind of, where it's like we
It,
focus on the working man, and it's uh, like it's a good, it's like, it makes sense why you would do that, and it might like have some decent effect politically. But as far as like what's actually being done, it's kind of like a half measure. Like
yeah,
Biden's like the most leftist
terrible.
like version of Reagan. That's like essentially what he is. And like leftist is like a strong overstatement, because like we've seen here.
I wouldn't say left. I don't know. Biden just kind of
I'm
like,
saying like of like the Reagan archetype, which basically every president has followed since Reagan, like Clinton would,
okay,
like
I
of
guess.
that archetype, he's like the left most of it, but it's still like
Uh,
it still exists in that sphere. He hasn't transcended it, and he
yeah,
probably
I
won't
know.
ever transcend it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
but
because
mhm.
and I don't say that just because it's like, oh, he's like the greatest president ever, but like you just look at like how he's governing, it is to the left of Obama and Clinton, and obviously any Republican.
Mm.
So, there you
Um,
have it.
all right. So, because that's also another can of worms, then we got to get to the next topic. Uh, I'm not gonna start another
Yeah.
thing in there. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the Supreme Court now. So get ready, buckle up. We have some opinions that you may or may not agree with. So this is gonna be the real stuff. Okay, so the first one that I'm gonna talk about is the discrimination case. So this was a case of this company had this person had a wedding website, where they design invitations and stuff like that. And apparently, they said that this gay couple went up to them and asked them if they could make gay wedding invitations, and they said no, and they were upset by it, and they took it to the Supreme Court, which apparently turns out that these people weren't even real. It wasn't even a real case, and I couldn't believe it. I said, "Wow, I did not." All right, so right off the bat, what's interesting to me is that and the biggest problem with it, which we're gonna bring Andrew in a little bit, but he's got a lot to say on this, but how broad this is. So it's about how you could turn someone down because you don't agree with their, if they're gay or this or that identity. Which okay, I understand if you're religious and you don't believe in, you know, I guess making gay wedding invitations, like fine. Like for me, I don't think that's that big of a deal because it's like, all right, we'll give money to somebody who's gonna treat you the way you want to be treated. That's how I see it, or how I see it, which for me is, well, listen, a customer is a customer, money is green, right? I don't think that you know there's really a lot to say going against that. I mean, I just take the money and just make the invitations. But hey, I'm no wedding designer. I don't make wedding invitations, so what do I know, I guess. And these people are Christian. I mean, I'm Catholic. I mean, but look, I mean, some people view things differently. I mean, um, I was in a chatting with someone who's Muslim who, turned them down because it's, they don't, for their religious reasons, they wouldn't do it. Basically, sum it all up. And I understand these things, and I don't think that that's a problem. And I think Andrew's going to get into more of the broader stuff and why he feels the problem. And I think that some of you might agree. But let's get right into this case. Okay, so the Supreme Court, which ruled in a hypothetical case. Okay, so that goes against Article 3, which says that you have to have an actual case or controversy in order to go to the Supreme Court and seek relief. So there's no case there. But again, they ruled on it anyway. So um, there's a chance, I guess, they could seek a rehearing over it to get this decision stricken from the book because, again, it wasn't a real case. So that's really all you have to know here. I mean, there's really nothing else to this case other than you could you could deny someone their business if they don't like the way you look. So, like I said, there's going to be people who are going to, how do I say this to be in a PG way? Well, it's not so PG, but being an asshole about it. Like some people are going to be a real asshole about it, right? But some people are just gonna be like, yeah, well, that's my religion, and I understand some people, wouldn't want to do that. For me, I'm a business guy. I think that you do business with almost anybody. I don't think it's a problem, but I also don't think of it the way they do. So anyway, we're gonna tie in Andrew here because I think Andrew's got a lot more to say on this because I see that smile. He's ready to go. He's gun blazing. You thought my rant was going crazy? I can't wait to see this guy's rant. So
Well, to start off, you didn't mention the justification that the court used in their decision. The justification basically is that this website maker constitutes as a expressive product and service, and their argument is that not that you know expressive products and services are not covered under non-discrimination laws, meaning that if you run a expressive product, then you don't have you basically can discriminate against whoever you want. Which for starters, that means that there really isn't it's a pretty wide range of things that kind of constitute that. It's like great florists, hairstylists, photographers, etc. Like there's just a lot of it reaches very far. This is a lot more than just some niche thing. And some of these products, I mean, there's places where you'll go there and what if it's a majority religious town and you're like a sexual minority? or if they're majority racist and you're a racial minority, which gets to the next point, is that this not only includes sexual minorities, it also includes all minorities because it doesn't just stop at the religious argument; it goes for everything. And it's been kind of like the consensus, for the most part, that when it comes to businesses, you can't deny, you know, racial or ethnic or sexual minorities business if they go to your business, but this does that. And I mean, sure, you could argue, oh, in a lot of contexts, the business incentives aren't there to discriminate, but sometimes, I mean, they don't lose enough and they can do that. Why would you deny someone a product because, oh, well, they can just go to another place? Maybe they can't. Um, for example, I work in a pharmacy, and my pharmacy doesn't do this, thankfully, but it is legal for the pharmacist in any given pharmacy to say, I don't feel comfortable distributing this to you, so I'm not going to dispense it. Which sometimes it can be used in a way where it's like, oh, well, I have to check back with the doctor and see, oh, maybe if the doctor's prescribing like a bad dose or something along those lines, or they don't understand what the patient's state is. Like, stuff like that can happen, sure, but it's also used in ways where you know if a woman needs to get an abortion, they can say, oh, well, I'm not selling you your Plan B, or I'm not dispensing your abortion medication or birth control. Or in the case of a transgender person, they can say, oh, well, I'm not going to prescribe your, or dispense your medication for that. It's just not like I don't know. To me, I think discrimination is just flatly wrong. If you don't want to sell products to people that aren't like you, or it's against your religion, then I think you need to find work in places that aren't going to put you in those situations if it's that big of a deal to you.
And there you have it. You got your little Andrew rant. I mean, what I think is it really comes down to, and I think that is something that me and Andrew could agree with. You're worried about certain type of customer or whatever, and you don't want to sell to that person. Well, just don't go into business. That's really it. Just don't go into business. I mean, don't because you're gonna try and sell something to someone, but you don't want to sell it.
Yeah, at
What's the
least
point
not
of getting
in
into business?
at least not in a place like America where there's just too many people,
Yeah.
too
So,
diverse.
I mean, like I said, and look, I mean, this is a great plug. Pro Political Gear does not discriminate. You look at what's on there. We have everything.
Yeah, it really
Uh,
is.
it really has everything on there. Almost. I mean, I haven't updated the stuff in a while, which I know I should, and it's been a while. But some of the stuff that's already on there, and they're pretty some cool stuff. So you go check that one out. But I mean, you look at that, it's like I obviously I would never discriminate. I mean, I'm not going to do that in general, but to do that in business and be like, oh no, I don't think you should buy this. Like,
I don't think
you
you
know what I
should
mean? Can
buy
you can
this.
you imagine how stupid that is? No, I mean, if people want something, then they buy it. It's that simple. Like people are gonna want certain things, so I sell it. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. I don't see why it's such a foreign concept to people. But anyway, uh, that's the case. It was all. It wasn't even like it was like I said, hypothetical case. Okay,
Yeah, it was
so
like bullshit from front to back.
that right there is a problem. So we'll see what happens there. I don't know if they're gonna revisit that case, but anyway, we got two other cases we have to talk about.
Yep, this one's
Uh,
choice
yeah,
one for
and
me.
Andrew's got a case that he's ready to put out another rant. Oh, jeez.
So
Here
in
we
a 6
go.
3 decision, the High Court, Supreme Court, ruled that the Biden administration does not have the authority under the 2003 HEROES Act, I believe it is, the post 9/11, basically to extend relief to people, suffering in crises. And they tried to say, well, the COVID pandemic was a crisis, so all of the populace of America should be entitled to student debt relief. The court struck that down, and they basically said that the education department changed the language or modified it too drastically to include every borrower in the country. Like that's somehow a bad thing. That everyone should be entitled to some kind of relief. And yeah, so obviously I've kept up with it. I've talked about it a couple of times. I strongly support the decision to do student loan relief. I think that more should be done, honestly, in that regard. More to make college free or affordable. So Biden, canceling 10K, while that's not, you know, the most of it at all, it's still a lot, and it would be a very meaningful change in a lot of people's lives. Specifically, poorer people who tried school, maybe didn't get to finish school, and they're working, and now they have this like kind of just extra burden on their back. Like, why not relieve those people who are working people and they just couldn't finish school for whatever reason? I think that's fine. Um, Obviously the court didn't, along with the people that kind of brought these bogus cases to the court to have this happen. So thankfully, the administration is actually responding in what I think is the correct way, which is to protect student loan borrowers and also to try to reintroduce student debt relief. For one, because during the reconciliation process, one of the concessions Democrats made was they basically they have to end the pause that was implemented during COVID. Like, it has like a hard end date, which is like September, like around this time basically. And then starting September, they are expected to make payments again. I think the plan for the Biden administration has always been to kind of like do the debt relief at the same time that payments come back. But obviously, because it's kept getting like blocked and circumvented, it never got to go through. So now we're approaching a point where there is no student debt relief and they're going to go back to payments. So what they didn't respond was they'd have what they call like an off-ramp period, where if you don't make your payments, it's not going to affect your credit and you can't default on your debt. But unfortunately, you still build interest on the debt. So that's kind of like the main problem with student loans is the interest. So it's like a very huge thing where it's like, okay, you're not gonna pay your loans for a year because you can't afford it, and then you'll just be in a worse position. You shouldn't include interest in that. Granted, I mean, as a whole, like, the situation really isn't Biden's fault, but that's something he should do, is not include interest in that off-ramp period. The other piece of this is that they do want to use a different justification to cancel student debt through the Higher Education Act of 1965. This is probably going to be a significantly stronger case than what they tried to pull with the HEROES Act, because there's direct language that basically says that the government can compromise, waive, or release loans. So, very straightforward reading. It would be very hard to really make that case. Oh, well, you can't do this. Because especially when you factor in that the argument that the court made is, well, you're modifying this language to include much more people than what the intention of this law was to be. And and that's kind of the frustrating part too, is that this always existed as an option. And from the start, knowing that we have a majority conservative court, and there were a lot of progressive people, personalities, politicians all saying, if you're gonna cancel debt, this should be how you do it. Even leading a lot of people to just assume like, oh, well, this debt thing is just bullshit. He's just gonna have the court cancel it, and then we're just gonna go la la la, and say, oh, we did something. But to Biden's credit, he is actually gonna change up on it, even if it could potentially lead to some problems just because of how delayed everything kind of turned out to be. And yeah, I mean, that's basically all there is to this, to the debt thing.
It's funny to me how and obviously you didn't mention this and you didn't have to. I mean, we mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Is that a lot of these people that are against, the student loan because they'd be like, oh, it's unfair to other people. I understand that.
It's also
But these are the same people that got the PPP loans and they got so much money from this. And they'd be like, oh, I get loans, but you can't.
yeah.
That's the problem. That's the obvious problem. Like, I understand you want to say, okay, well, maybe that's not fair. Well, look, if you're gonna help people out, okay, and you're gonna give out loans, why are you gonna help the students? Why are you gonna help the next generation? You're gonna help these people making poor decisions.
Yeah, sometimes
That's who you help. And that is really where it gets me, and that's where
that's
makes,
the even more ironic part, because the argument that a lot of these guys make is, oh, well, you're just helping rich people. But like I said, and even
yeah,
the explicit way it was crafted was that if you made over a certain amount of money, you weren't entitled to any loans, and if you qualified for like grants, then you would get more money. So it was a program explicitly designed to help like the poorest students. I mean, obviously, it probably went a little bit beyond the poorest, but still, like, the point was to help poor and working class people, which is what I think is just a good thing. So to not do that, I think is kind of stupid. And then especially to use that as your justification and turn around and then receive or be for these PPP business loans, which those actually only really help the rich people to, maintain, or, not rich, but better off people. which is very hypocritical, I think.
I think it's very hypocritical, and that's really the problem here that I think people need to look at. Is because if we're giving loans for that, it's like, well, why can't the next generation, get loans for them going to school? Don't we want to educate our youth? Is that not the goal? Is that not what we want them to do? If not, just say it. That's fine. You could say it. I'll disagree with you, but say it.
Yeah,
Tell me
exactly.
that. I want to know. But this is, or you could say like, all right, well, college is filled with indoctrinated people, and then you could go on your whole thing there. There's always a way out of this.
Yeah, but
But
objectively speaking, if you're like in
yeah,
any semblance of reality, like a college degree can do a lot. It's
oh,
not
absolutely.
necessary. There's still a lot of high-paying jobs that you can use through
Okay,
other
of
ways
course,
and certificates and other programs.
absolutely,
But college is kind of like the bread and butter for what a lot of people will do to get into their careers. And so
absolutely.
yeah, anything that makes that alleviates that or makes that more affordable, I support.
Mm, exactly. Well, going into school, because I think we're done there. I think we said everything we needed to. Another fun topic that we love talking about is affirmative action. So another Supreme Court. This is the last Supreme Court ruling we'll be talking about. So then we're going to get into something after this that I think is going to be very interesting for some of our viewers who maybe not know about this because it just released. But stay tuned. Okay, so affirmative action. All right, and there's a lot of debate on it, and look, I'm still looking at it, and I'm still figuring out what the best way to go around it is. But let me explain to you what exactly is affirmative action. What is it supposed to do? So, is there to basically diversify a university and give opportunities to those who normally wouldn't get into certain schools. By certain schools, I mean Ivy League schools. All right. So we're talking top of the top. So if you are poor, black, or Hispanic, it's like you wouldn't have to do as well as middle class Asians or white people, okay, in schools, but I mean, you still have to do, pretty good, but obviously there's like a level to it, all right, when it comes to, whether it's SATs or just general GPA, and stuff like that. And these universities have quotas and slots they had reserved for them, and that caused a lot of controversy. Um, and there's a lot of videos out there showing how a lot of Asian people and a lot of Asian families are upset how they couldn't get into the schools because, oh, this black person or this Hispanic person or, you know, didn't they made it to the school and not their Asian child. And I understand it. And it's honestly a rough topic to talk about because it's I who wins here in this? Well, when you look at cutting or getting rid of affirmative action, at first I'm kind of thinking like, all right, well that's a good thing because now you don't have to basically judge on race. You just judge on like their academics, which ideally is exactly what I would want. I would want to just focus on that. Okay, but I think a big problem here is that we need to fund our poor schools and push students to go to basically any college. They don't have to go to Ivy League schools and this and that. And obviously, yeah, a lot of times, yeah, it does help them if they go to an Ivy League school. But my goal is to push people to just go to college as long as you get a education. Uh, that's what really that matters. If you get a bachelor's degree, that because even sometimes with a bachelor's degree, you sometimes can't even make it into the field that you want to, and it's very hard. And I understand that. That's why a lot of Gen Z's people are just creating their own business and doing other things. But one thing that I will say that is a problem with this, and I would be okay with affirmative action being cut, um, is, and this is an if they cut legacy admissions. If you know what legacy admissions are, legacy admissions is basically if you know somebody in the school or this or that, you have connections and you could get in. If they cut that to make it more fair, I think that would be a reason why you cut affirmative action. I mean, obviously, there are still some pros and cons to having affirmative action. in place, like some pros there. But and we'll see what happens going forward if this stays, or if this stays, um, if this cut stays. If you look back in, I think it was '98, there was a study done that students that actually, um, it was like a 208 or 209. I forgot what it was. It was basically like an affirmative action. I forget the exact city or state, so bear with me on that. Um, they the poorer students that couldn't make it, and then they did make it into these schools, actually got better jobs and lived better lives than they did if they didn't. So it makes this whole thing very interesting, and we could see what happens when it comes to the admission rates on different races, and seeing if black people, Hispanic people, even Native Americans, because Native Americans also on the chart that isn't doing so well. Um, if they were when they go into school, seeing what the rate is and seeing if they're doing better with this being cut or not. Um, and yeah, I know Andrew's got a lot to say on this. I think I said everything I was supposed to. I have written here. Uh, if I did, I'm sure a good old Andrew will help me out. Give your friend a hand.
So the real thing that needs to be cut is the legacy admissions. Legacy admissions are the real problem. I think that's the only thing that we should really talking about getting rid of. Where if you're alumni or if you know someone, then you qualify for the school easier in that way. I think that's more of an actual problem because if you're related to these people, you more likely than not have like an opportunity to live like a decent life or have the resources to get into these schools on your own, like truly on your own merits. And to compare that to like affirmative action, which does the opposite of that, which takes people who are in the least represented and often also the poorest communities in the country, to deny them that, I think is kind of ridiculous. There's examples of affirmative action being taken out of school of like areas, and it has like a really negative effect on the admission rate of black and Hispanic particularly students. And say, oh well, what about what if this and what if that? You have to factor in the real experiences that lead to the outcomes. You're like if you're a poor black person and you have like a three like a let's say like a 3.8 GPA, and you're in like this poor community, maybe you're less likely to have with your parents or whatever. If you're like making it like that in that situation, and you got like the white kid who's in the upper middle class family, his parents are always there to support him and have all the time to kind of raise him properly, quote unquote, and that kid has like a 4.0, I'm not really gonna be too upset if Harvard or whatever school takes the black kid with a slightly lower GPA, because at the end of the day, both those students have the tools necessary to learn and become like a very important member of whatever career they want to go down. So yeah, I mean, I think getting rid of affirmative action is a very stupid thing, and it's just gonna, kind of reduce the amount of like people that will get the opportunity that have had up to this point because of these admissions.
Yeah, I think that the best way is that we'll find out in a few years all
But
the
there's already
like
examples of places
oh
that.
no, there are. Yeah, there's examples,
So
but
how
I'm
is it
saying
gonna, what I mean? Unless certain, I mean,
oh yeah,
what might happen is certain states might try to like play around it in some kind of way.
exactly. Yeah.
But
So,
that's not really to say that not having it is fine though, or having like it be explicitly unconstitutional is good.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
I don't know. I think
I'm I'm still fighting with myself on this topic. I think it's definitely and I hate that I don't have like a 100% firm stance on it, because I like to have a stance on things, but this one, as I was reading more into it and I was looking up videos, I was looking up articles, and we saw the data, we watched the video that came out actually by the Wall Street Journal. They put out like a little like with some graphics and everything, and makes things like very easy to the eye to see. And they interviewed this guy who is very pro affirmative action, and it's kind of like I understand it, and I definitely think that if there's any stance I could agree with Andrew 110%, it's to get rid of legacy admissions. That's like my 100% firm stance on that. When it comes to affirmative action, um, like I said, I would want in a perfect world, I would want it where you have to get be number one. But I understand it also helps other people if people that normally wouldn't get these opportunities now if they were to get these opportunities. So for me, it's very hard, and I don't want to be a flip flop guy on this, so I'm not gonna go too much further on this. Look, there's some things that I still juggle with, and I'm like, man, like, what is the right call here? Because
Yeah.
what me and Andrew, what we do here is that we don't just go by a certain base, and we'll say like, oh, well, this would make us X amount more money or more people follow us because we have these decisions. Like these are actually our stances. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like if I'm in politics and I don't have a stand on something, I don't want to say too much on it. I will describe what's going on, but to say my stance on it, I mean, and look, I could go either way on this one. I really can. And Andrew knows that I was before this video, before this podcast, I was pro getting rid of affirmative action. Then I was doing a lot more research on it, and now I'm like, kind of like, huh, well, maybe I don't know. Like in theory, yes, but in actuality,
There's a lot of things that exist in the world right now that
there's a
aren't
lot
really
of things.
accounted for.
So, like I said, I'm not gonna have a firm stance on that. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, my conservative friends. I'm not going to be pushing against affirmative action right now in this video. Maybe at a later date. Maybe
Probably not.
probably not.
But
But but hey, I mean, look, I mean, there's a lot of times where I'll push back on Andrew on certain things, but this one I just can't do at the moment. I just don't. I just don't. I just I hate to be so centristy about it. But
yeah,
you know what I
it's
mean?
you.
But this, hey, listen, this is the real world. This is, um, some people just don't have a stance on certain things, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You know, so it's okay when we get like donors or whatever. I will definitely have like a stance on it. No, I'm joking. But but speaking of having money, I guess I could tie it in. I tried. Battle of the Billionaires. No, there's not Trump versus McMahon. Andrew, you have that mouse on my screen this entire time. I want to choke you. I keep on seeing that mouse there. It's okay. Anyway, sorry for our listeners on Spotify and elsewhere. Who did not see that. But Battle of the Billionaires, again, not Trump versus McMahon, WrestleMania 24. Or 23, I'm sorry. I messed up there. But we have Mark Zuckerberg, which we talked about in the last video. We talked about Mark Zuckerberg and we talked about Elon Musk. But this time, before it was just like they were gonna duel it out. They want to do a boxing match or something, a cage match or whatever. And I think that would be fun to watch. I mean, me and Andrew would sit there. We would love to watch that. Just like maybe you guys would love to see something like that happen. So Mark Zuckerberg is throwing a punch at him, and this is not just a jab. This is like a straight up punch. He is, or he just has delivered a Twitter rival app called Threads. It's literally Twitter, except it's like hooked up to your Instagram account. That's really it. Kind of looks a little bit like a mix of like Twitter and Tumblr. Like that's the best way to describe it. The way it looks. It only shows you like a recommended feed, and it's a bunch of like people with blue check marks, and you know what I mean. It's like a bunch of people you probably don't know, and like who the hell is this person on my feed? I guess they'll fix it once more people start joining the app, or when you have more friends joining the app or whatever. So, like I said, it's connected to Instagram, and which that's what it's called, is only serves to fracture the Twitter alternative seeking user base. That's really what it is. I mean, if you look at there's Truth Social, there's Getter, and there's I think Blue Sky is one made by the founder of Twitter. I mean, there's so many different Twitter-like applications, but Threads is gonna be the one that's gonna be the rival because who the hell is using Getter unless you're a loser? Sorry, but it's true. Okay, or Truth Social, like no one with the right state of mind is gonna be on those apps. Okay, um, and it was set to drop when this video drops on July 6th. But that did not happen. Instead, they pushed it forward, and it's out right now. So I was using it, and I was using it before we were recording. And it was like, "You ready to record?" And I was like, "Oh, no, hold on 1 second. I'm playing with this thing first." So I got a little new toy to play with, which is unfortunate. So Threads. Will it beat Twitter, I guess? I mean, Twitter, I hope not. Listen, I just got Blue verified on Twitter just so I could get more people and try to, have somewhat of a social media presence. But I don't know how to feel about Threads. I really don't. I think it's a very interesting concept, and I think that it could actually rival Twitter. We've seen other companies rival others before, and this is backed by Facebook. This is backed by Zuckerberg. I mean, this is not going to be a small time app. Okay, this is going to be a big deal. You've seen the success Facebook has. You've seen the big success Instagram has, and now you might just be seeing the success of Threads. So, Andrew, I'm gonna tune you in now. Um, what are your thoughts on Threads? I mean, you just used it for like very briefly. I sent you a friend request. You did answer it, so that's good. We're friends on there.
No,
Okay.
or for mutuals. I think it's like a following type of deal. Like
Following, yeah, yeah, following, yeah. You know what I mean. All right.
yeah. I don't know. Like I said, it just kind of felt like a more incomplete version of Twitter. Basically, like there's only a For You page, and it populates like a bunch, probably like Instagram partnered people that we don't know about.
Yeah, it's
The
a bunch
feed
of
every
people. I'm
two
like,
seconds.
who are these people? I'm scrolling
But
through. I'm
it's
like, who
also
the
like
hell
it
are they?
literally just launched, so obviously people
Oh
you would
yeah,
actually follow aren't going to be having like dozens of posts about their day or the news or whatever.
of
It's
course.
very new. Um, as far as like, because like I said, there's kind of like because Twitter very obviously has a lot of problems. You know what I mean? There's
Mhm.
like the usability's just gone downhill. Advertisers are fleeing the platform. You just using it. It's like before it felt like when you were like engaging, especially because we were for political people. So when we engage with politics on Twitter, before it was kind of like like neoliberal, like like liberal people. There's some progressives, there's some conservatives. Like it felt kind of like reflective of like mainstream political dialogue. But now you go on there and it's like the stuff that gets boosted is like the most far right, extremist type stuff. Like me and Chris are always telling each other like these silly things where it's like, they'll be like, "Oh, would you rather your son be like in the Klan or be gay?" And then like the Klan is winning. It's like all this crazy like racist type stuff.
Bro, it's not. You know what the craziest thing is?
What?
Is that Clan wins by like
Yeah,
91%
it's
to
like by a
like
lot.
8. Yeah, dude,
And
it's
it's
insane. I was like,
and it's
how?
one
Like,
thing because
how?
people will be funny and do stupid stuff, but then you like look and you like go to the replies. And there's people who are like pay for like Twitter Blue, so their tweets get prioritized. And they're like justifying it like unironically. These are real like things that happen. So and you can say, oh well, they're bots, this and that, but it's like you pay money to lie. Like I don't know. I think that there's a point where what you're saying, even if it's on the internet, gets past being like a joke or ironic, and it just starts being like, well, this is what you think. You're paying money to have this message be out there for people to see. And yeah, I mean that's the state of Twitter. So obviously, as a result of that, there's a lot of other companies that are kind of swooping in and being like, well, maybe we can take the pie and not have all the normal people. Because that was, like you said, you mentioned like Truth and Getter, like those were supposed to be the right wing kind of versions of Twitter, but now Twitter itself is that essentially.
Yeah.
Um, Blue Sky is kind of like it's gaining momentum. There's a lot of right now it's not public, so you need to be in like a wait list to even use it. It seems to be like people seem to think it functions fine. It is very funny though how you mentioned Dorsey is on the board for Blue Sky, so I guess a bit of seller's remorse in a way. But he already wasn't working for Twitter by the time that Elon bought it, so probably didn't like the direction they were going before, and obviously Elon's not really fixing that. So because he
Hmm.
he had like a specific vision of what he wanted Twitter to be, and obviously it's not living up to that kind of at all.
Yeah.
um, that's interesting, and like you said, I mean, Threads they kind of push the launch out so they can beat mostly Blue Sky. I feel like that's like the biggest thing that could be a notable competitor to Twitter. And as far as like if it will get traction, it could. Instagram is a very popular platform. If it's just an extension of that, they might honestly morph it into an extension of that, depending how well the solo app does. And that could honestly be it could be a big deal for that format.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's potential, and it'll be interesting kind of thing to kind of see develop.
I think we had a video.
Oh, we did. Oh, Jim Cramer.
Yeah.
It's funny. Let's play it.
I don't think they thought of Twitter. But in that, I am being facetious. But I say game, set, match Zuckerberg because he's really learned his lesson. He really understands that it does matter, that you want to be committed to the community. And Facebook is a Instagram is a really terrific product. And Twitter is awful. And my kids were saying, like, why are you posting on Twitter? I said, well, it's free. I said, well, that's just great. The worst things in life are free.
Does that mean you're going to migrate? Are you going to move your content
100%.
delivery to Threads?
I'll put some Twitter in just because I'm a masochist who doesn't mind being hated, but that's been the way of most of my life since fourth grade. I don't think.
Yeah. If you don't know, that's Jim Cramer, very famous for being wrong about a lot of things. Including the 2008 stock crash. But honestly, I mean, he's probably more correct here than he usually is.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we'll see. I mean, look, the metaverse really didn't work out for Zuckerberg. Everything is now named Meta. I mean, but I guess that has time to grow. I don't think people really care about. I think he has to be. I don't know really what he would have to do to fix the whole metaverse situation. That's a whole like can of worms. But that
Yeah.
didn't do so well. But his social media like Facebook, obviously Instagram and and now Threads. I mean, it seems like they're on the path of success here. But he's gonna have to look. Elon Musk is screwing around with Twitter. I think this is the best time to come up with an app like this.
Yeah.
If there was any time, it'd be now. And if there's any person that would back this or start this, it would be someone like Zuckerberg. People know that he has the experience. People know that he has been successful. They know that it has the
It's
possibility of
also
being a good, dedicated
it's
app.
also the fact it's built off Instagram. Also, like when you set up your account, it's linked to your Instagram,
Yeah,
and you can retroactively follow all your Instagram people. So if any of them make an account on Threads, then you're already following them.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's definitely a very big structural advantage that Zuckerberg has in this kind of race to try to replace Twitter. That's not even a guarantee that he'll win it, but there is a lot
But,
there for it to play out in his favor.
it's still definitely interesting. And like all other things, like I usually say, we'll see what happens. I
Yeah.
mean,
I think that's
I
all,
feel like
right?
it's like my catch. I feel like that's my catchphrase. We'll see what happens. I mean, I feel like I say that almost every single episode, but it's true. We're gonna see what happens. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. But anyway, uh, so thank you guys. I think that's all we have to say, right? I think
Yeah.
that's it for today's show.
Mhm.
Okay, so unfortunately, no, this has not been uploaded on Wednesday. This was recorded very late Wednesday night. We did not get a chance to record on Tuesday. We were too busy having a good time of the
It's
Fourth of
4th of
July.
July. Yeah, we give
Yeah, it's like we weren't gonna post, and obviously there's other things that we do during the day, so couldn't record Wednesday in the daytime. So hey, listen, we surprised you, I guess, with a Thursday episode, and like I said, most likely we have the Friday episode coming. We have more news that we have to talk about, um, and good to be back on schedule. Last time I said that was pretty bad. Actually, we didn't go back on schedule, so I don't want to jinx it, but you get what I'm saying. So everyone, have a good rest of your day, and we will see you guys next time. So leave a like, comment, subscribe, and rate us a 5-star on Spotify if you haven't already. And see you next time.
Peace.